And thanks for letting Fred speak. Fred just celebrated his 50th year of practicing law. And so Fred has been doing the world's longest retirement. I've got my partner John here today, but Fred may end up practicing longer than either John or I. But he's definitely, to your point, Jim, a fantastic person to learn from, who really paved the stage for us as lawyers, but also for the ecosystem. So we're very grateful. And thanks for letting us be a part of today. I'm super excited because as a venture lawyer, like Fred mentioned, one of the things that almost all of our clients have in common is they're trying hard to find capital. And there's a lot of paths to that, and I'm sure many folks in the room have run that race before. And so I'm excited today because this is a little bit different than what we've done here before. I think we had good growth and a couple other funds here to talk to you guys. I'm excited today to have Liam and Amy up as well to talk about a little different twist on the model, and excited for you guys to talk about what you're doing. You may hear some words you don't exactly know what they mean. I know I have, and so as we go through those, we will break it down, ask Amy and Liam what some of this means. We're going to start with Amy. Maybe tell us a little bit, I know Jim gave the introduction, a little bit about abundance as well as you, and maybe what type of need abundance was originally created to help solve or address.
Sure. Thanks for having me here this afternoon. It's good to see some familiar faces from around the North Carolina ecosystem and some new friends I met today. But I am originally from Cleveland, Ohio. I moved to Charlotte in 2001. I've been there since. Started my career in corporate banking. I worked for Bank of America and Ally, and then I jumped to the nonprofit sector, worked as an executive director and a chief development officer for 10 years. So fundraising became a skill set that I actually really enjoyed. And so I have since kind of pivoted into the venture and angel space. So I just joined just 2 years ago, feels like just. I joined Venture South as a member of their angel network, and so that's helped me really learn some of the priorities of angel and VC, and really appreciate from hundreds of conversations with founders, the plight of just all of the things, right? Especially fundraising. And as a fundraiser, when I learned about venture philanthropy, which we'll kind of break down here shortly, which is leveraging philanthropic capital to fund for-profit social innovation, I couldn't believe that was legal. I was like, is this money laundering? I kind of feel like it's money laundering. Turns out it's not money laundering. It's just a little understood and more niche way to get some access to capital if you're building a company that is considered social good per the IRS specifically. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means also. But Abundance Capital is based out of Greenville. I met the founders at a conference. They were interested in getting some just kind of boots on the ground in Charlotte, which is where I live. And so I work with them to help them meet entrepreneurs who are building companies that are doing good things for people on the planet. And I'm helping them meet philanthropists, so people with wealth typically, although anyone can be a philanthropist, I would argue, but typically people with wealth that have money in philanthropy accounts, which we'll break down a little bit more later as well. And so they're 3 years old, and they're one of maybe 7 platforms across the country that make possible this investment of philanthropic capital into for-profit companies. The Impact Foundation, some of you might be familiar with that. That's a national platform that makes this money transfer possible. But Abundance Capital is focused on keeping Southeast dollars in the Southeast. And as a fundraiser in Charlotte for many years, I really want money that's earned and made in communities to stay in those communities and fuel those sectors, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit. So that's a little bit of history about Abundance and kind of my role and the hat that I'm wearing today.
Super. All right, Liam, over to you. Hot seat. Same thing. So a little bit about the fund, maybe your story as well.
Sure.
Obviously, you get to sort of walk in the footsteps of giants with Bill. Maybe even tell us about your name as well and sort of how the fund got the name.
Yeah. So I work for a guy named Bill Spruill. We'll tackle the name first because that's the easy
That
question.
sounds good.
I work for a guy named Bill Spruill. Bill is a really big sci-fi guy. And I'm not the world's biggest sci-fi guy, so I've worked with him for 8.5 years, and my life for the last 8.5 years has been like him making some obscure reference in a meeting, and then I'm like, I write it down, and then I have to like go home and watch a movie or read a book. So when we started 2NDF, which abbreviates Second Foundation, I had to read the Isaac Asimov Foundation trilogy. So if you would like a dissertation, let me know. But basically, Isaac Asimov is a very prolific sci-fi writer. He has this series called the Foundation series. It was originally a trilogy, and then I think he built more books around it. And within that series, there is this organization that is called the Second Foundation. That's kind of this shadowy, kind of mysterious, behind-the-scenes group of folks who do very small but intentional things in the present day that look to kind of butterfly effect, inflect large changes hundreds and thousands of years down the road. And so when we were ideating 2NDF, that was something that was important to Bill in terms of how we are named and what we are about, and especially how we like to think about time. We think it's very important, especially as a family office, which we'll get into what that means and what that looks like in a second, that we think longer term in support of founders particularly. So that was way longer than I thought it would be, but that's our name. 2NDF abbreviates Second Foundation. So I've worked with a guy named Bill for the last 8.5 years. He hired me as employee number 6 at a startup he founded called Global Data Consortium. Founded with a guy named Charles Gaddy. Bill led the business as CEO. When he hired me, he said, "You got to walk to work because we don't cover employee parking." And I would put an extra t-shirt in my backpack, and I started in the summer, so it was hot, in Raleigh, and Bill and Charles kind of tried to raise venture money, could not raise venture money, ended up bootstrapping the business. We sold the business to the London Stock Exchange Group in 2022 over my course of time there. Spent most of it in sales and business development. We grew the business to about 27 million ARR. And then when we were exiting, Bill was kind of thinking through how he wanted to put his money to work, and landed on this idea to put it to work in kind of 2 communities that are very important to him, with the idea of building more wealth within those communities in particular. And we thought the best vehicle to do that work through would be a family office. And so we started 2NDF as Bill's family office in August of 2022. And the 2 communities are the Triangle entrepreneurship community in particular, and kind of the entrepreneurial community across the state of North Carolina. So we actively invest in that area. We're philanthropically active in that area. And then we also invest in and have a couple philanthropic initiatives around Black founders across the nation, because Bill is, like Jim said, one of only a handful of really successful software founders, and wants to see that community grow. So all of our money, all of our time is spent focused on serving those 2 communities.
It's fantastic. So back over to you, Amy. They're the best panelists ever because they get to say, we're going to talk about this later, and it reminds me where we're going. So now we're going to go into some of the terms that we've already heard that might be a little bit new for folks. We talked about venture philanthropy. I know when we were talking, helping to understand sort of the process of what's going on and maybe the buzzwords that folks hear about, like donor advised funds. Tell us a little bit about like the terminology and maybe exactly how this works.
Sure. How many people in here are familiar with a donor advised fund? Okay, so a handful. So essentially, I basically break it down to a philanthropic savings account. So if you're working with a financial advisor and you have some wealth, right, whatever wealth is defined as, often your financial advisor, if they're a good advisor, will recommend that you open a donor advised fund. So if you have Fidelity or Northwestern Mutual, or in Charlotte, the largest community foundation in I think probably in the state, is the Foundation for the Carolinas. So you can open up a donor advised fund and you make a gift into it, and that is the taxable event for the IRS. So for example, if you're really have been blessed in life and you have a decent amount of money and you decide you want to give $100,000 annually away, you can write one check for $100,000 to your donor advised fund. Then you take that $100,000 tax break from the IRS, right? So it's one event instead of having to save a bunch of other receipts, right? For all the other philanthropy you do that year, you can do it that one time. And so then you direct that fund through your advisor on where to spend that money. Traditionally, the financial advisors and wealth advisors recommend you give that to nonprofits, right? So when you think about philanthropic capital, it's money that has to go to philanthropy. And so 501c3s specifically are the designation, right? Everyone's familiar with a nonprofit. But also, that money is also allowed to get invested in for-profit social innovation. But it's hard to understand. It's not super popular, at least it wasn't. It's gaining more momentum now. And so financial advisors typically don't even touch it because they don't really understand it and they don't really know how to, where to put your money, all of those things. So recently, I said a handful of companies like Abundance Capital have sprung up across the nation. They help donor advised fund holders make investments in for-profit social innovation. So that paves a way for founders who are raising money to go to philanthropists. So, a philanthropist is anyone who's giving money away. And usually when I'm in different communities, I think about the families whose names are on buildings, right? So those are people who are giving big chunks of money to causes that they care about publicly. And so those folks have wealth in philanthropy that they could potentially invest in your company. And how that works, we'll kind of get to that. But so venture philanthropy, like venture capital, is investing your philanthropic wealth into for-profit social innovation. And for-profit social innovation is defined by the IRS, but it's kind of loose. And so where we send founders is to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals website. Some of you may have heard of the 17 Sustainable Development SDGs. And so they're like clean water, workforce development, health and human services, like all of these kind of basic pillars of that you can measure your company against, which means that you could be considered a social impact company. So if you can go to that website and align your work with one or more of those, then you could potentially be able to receive capital from philanthropists, so family foundations, individuals with wealth who have money parked in philanthropy. So that's what a donor advised fund is. Family foundations are similar, just usually bigger and with more structure. So, but those are both, when I say philanthropic capital, that's what that means. You got the tax advantage when you made that one gift into that fund or that one gift into that foundation, and now you have to spend that money. And what I always tell founders, when you're fundraising in this capacity, these accounts are no longer technically their money. So when you're fundraising and somebody says, I'd really love to invest in you, but I'm all my capital is deployed, right? I'm in an angel fund or I'm waiting for these investments to come back to me. I just don't have any more money in my actual pocket. Well, if they have donor advised funds or family foundations, they likely don't know that they can write a check from those places to you as well. And so you can ask, what about a donor advised fund? What about a family foundation? Do you have any of these things? And if the answer is yes, then this is money that they have to give away. They have to either give it to a nonprofit or to you. But it's money they've already parted with. It's set aside for this purpose. And for some reason, it just, with great wealth, sometimes people forget they have donor advised funds. What a privilege to forget you have $100,000 sitting in an account somewhere. But it happens. And so people forget about it. And it's a great place to get some money off the sidelines and into the hands of entrepreneurs who are doing good for people on the planet. So that's a lot. And if there's more questions, we can dive into it more, but it's essentially what venture philanthropy is. And then Abundance Capital simply moves the money. So philanthropist writes a check to Abundance Capital, who is a 501c3. So that's how we can receive the money. And then we give the money to you. Abundance Capital is on your cap table. So we call ourselves the friendliest investor. We don't want a board seat. We don't really care, right? Because philanthropic capital acts differently. But you as a fundraiser, or you as a entrepreneur, it acts the same as any other money that you're fundraising for. So you use the same investment vehicle you're using. And then when you sell your company for $1 billion and there's a huge liquidity event, what happens is that investor gets paid back whatever equity, right, they have, just like everybody else. The money has to stay in philanthropy. It can't go in their pockets because the IRS would really hate that you got to profit off money that you got a tax break on and then got to make money on, right? So the IRS would not like that at all. However, you can make your $100,000 donor advised fund grow to $1 million. So as Jim explained with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So it's a way to recycle their philanthropy, potentially help them grow their philanthropy, and help you get money in your pocket now so that you can grow your business and do good.
And so Liam, over to you. You said family office. And so we actually had a client ask us, like, when when you hear family office, are we talking about like Bill, his friends and family, all sort of hanging out? What's a family office? And I guess, can you help us understand that relative to the context of like what we may think about as venture, even now sort of venture philanthropy, like at Abundance? What's the difference?
100%. So we get Family Foundation a lot, which is not a family office or particularly close. We get Family Business a lot, which is, I mean, we all get along really well. We're thick as thieves, but we're not a family business. A family office is basically an entity that exists to manage one family's or a handful of families' assets. And so you can imagine like how many different structures and forms and shapes and sizes that could take. Like there's a saying, if you've met one family office, you've met one family office. Like everyone is totally different. And so like at a high level, you have a woman or an entire family or multiple generations of a family or multiple generations of multiple families that come together and they say, we have specific goals for our assets and how we want them managed, that like these off-the-shelf money management products or financial advisors don't necessarily meet the full mold in how we want our wealth managed. We're going to create something that manages our wealth, deploys our assets, whatever, in the way that is unique and aligned with our goals. And so that could be one guy, one family, multiple families. If it's multiple families, it's a multifamily office. It's a single family, it's a single family office. And so I know I have colleagues and buddies who I was having lunch with one on Tuesday who manages a family office that runs an operating business. They are one of the largest home health businesses on the East Coast. And they take the cash flow from that operating business and then they invest it in other home health businesses, primarily doing M&A, right? You have other family offices, typically like the technology founder structure. You've got a founder who has a liquidity event, has a big pile of money, they want to put that money to work. Where does that money typically go? Into startups. And so they might want to be LPs in venture funds like A16Z and Founders Fund and Boom and whoever, right? But they might want to also be actively deploying directly into early stage deals themselves. And so they will hire a team within their family office to go deploy directly into venture. And so like our remit at 2NDF is to put Bill's money to work in the kind of North Carolina triangle-centric technology community with a focus on early stage applied science startups, pre-seed to Series A. So we put money to work there, and we put money to work in pre-seed to Series A technology businesses, could be software, could be applied science, anything in between, across the United States, as long as it is Black founded or Black led. And so, like, that is how specific our remit is. We do direct venture deals in both of those categories. We are philanthropically active in both those categories. We host programming in both of those categories. And so that is very different from all of my other friends who are investors inside different family offices, what their day-to-day looks like, right? But that is kind of the broad view of, I guess, what a family office is or what it can be.
Gotcha.
Specific down to like what we do.
Okay, and 2NDF, you said sort of early to Series A-ish is where you guys are. What
Yep.
about, does Abundance have any sort of particular, so more open to?
Yeah, so Abundance does not have money. So it's not a fund. The way the model works is that a founder meets a philanthropist, and let's say you're building a cancer research startup and the philanthropist cares deeply about cancer research. And they've been given all their money to the American Cancer Society, but now they find out they can invest in your cancer research for-profit startup. So you talk about how you would work great together and the type of investment that could be made, and then together you come to Abundance Capital and we move the money. So people always come to us and they're like, how much do you invest? We're like, we don't invest anything. We don't hold, it's not a fund. It's a platform to move capital that typically hasn't been able to move in this way. And so that's how, but we don't care what stage, we don't care what instrument you're raising on. The only thing we care about is that we could prove to the IRS if they later come back to us and say, hey, there's a lot of money moving through this platform, and we're not getting any taxes for it, right? We can defend that your cancer research startup is doing good for people on the planet. That's an easy example, right? No one would dispute that cancer research is social impact, but there's a lot of companies that's sort of gray, right? So sometimes it's super clear that you have a social impact company, and sometimes you got to make a little bit of a case for it. Workforce development is that kind of a tricky one. Somebody the other day was like, I employ people. Does that mean I'm like a workforce development? I was like, that's a stretch. So as long as we can defend to the IRS, if they ever came calling, that the investment was from a philanthropist to a social impact company, that's all we really care about. Okay, so I'll just use one number for example. In Charlotte, in this foundation that we have, there's an estimated $4 billion sitting in donor advised funds that is undeployed. So and that money has already been given away, right? So it's no longer individuals' money. They get to direct where it goes, but it's sitting. And so that money could be invested in North Carolina startups. Most of those donor advised fund holders do not know that this is an option or how it works. It's very daunting, especially for large foundations. They just don't know how to figure it out, right? So part of my role in Charlotte is to help kind of demystify this and figure this out. But so founders always say, how much should I ask for? I'm like, they might have $1 million in their DAF. Ask for $1 million. They already gave the money away. You're not asking them to reach into their pocket and figure out how they're going to part with $1 million. They're asking them to take all the money they've got in their donor advised fund, or half the money, or a quarter of the money. Some people have $100 million in their DAF, just sitting. So it needs to get deployed. It needs to be given to all of you, and get off the sidelines, right? And then do something good with it. So the terms Abundance Capital doesn't care about, the length of the agreement, the only thing we do care, it has to be, this is not a grant pass-through. So you can't ask for, if somebody's like, I want to just give you a grant, right? This is not a way to make that happen. It has to be an equity raise or a debt raise. It has to act like venture or act like angel investment. It's not just a way to write a check to a nonprofit in order to help them grow. Also, your parents can't invest. Parents and immediate family are excluded per the IRS. So that's one other quick kind of caveat. Mom and dad can't write you a check from their donor advised fund to fuel your company, because the IRS really doesn't like that close relationship situation.
What about a first cousin?
First cousin can. Immediate family is off the table. Yes, no family, no immediate family, so mom, dad, siblings, and spouse. First cousin, yes.
Can you give us 3 other names besides Abundance Capital that do this?
I can give you 2, not 3. Impact Foundation is the national organization, and then Inspire Access is out of, I think, Delaware or maybe DC area. So Inspire Access is another company that does it. But I actually tried to do a competitive analysis, and I couldn't find any other companies that were set up exactly like we are. So there's not really competition. Also, we're a nonprofit, so we're not really making a ton of money on this process either. There's a small fee that's charged. The donor gets charged a fee in order to participate and make this money move, so the founder doesn't have to pay anything. And that money is just operations to keep the lights on and pay the 3 staff members that Abundance Capital has. Do you want to do a question? I'm going to wait on our questions.
Jim, you want us to do questions throughout?
Well,
It's okay, I'll wait.
he'll have a
You
specific
were asking
question.
questions, so I thought we were doing questions.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll wait.
Jim hopped in and
My event, my rules.
just
Yeah.
went off the rails.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
We'll,
so
we'll
we
save a question for Adam later.
We definitely, we'll spend,
Okay.
I think we have a good Q&A time sort of coming, we'll
Yeah.
speak, and then we'll turn it over. So Liam, talk about maybe to this group a little bit, the seed to sort of Series A. as you guys think about a different process, right, of thinking about how you interact with the cap table and come into an investment,
Sure.
what's that like? Like, who's making decisions at the family office? Who are folks talking to? Is it you?
Yeah.
What role does Bill play? And then kind of once you get into looking at investment, are you guys taking board seats? What are you doing?
Yeah, and that's a good reminder of something that you asked in your question, but I did not address, and I should have,
Yeah.
which is kind of like, you know, hearing what Abundance does and their focus, like how are we similar to, where do we overlap with philanthropic venture versus traditional venture?
Yeah.
And like our whole exercise is we believe that the most efficient way that we can create more wealth within kind of those two communities we focus on is by giving successful founders the ability to succeed, right? Deploying early stage risk capital so that founders can get to their first commercial pilot, so that they get their first customer, they can get out of the university lab, whatever it is. And that if they are successful and we can continue to support them with our network and with our dollars, that when they experience a liquidity event, hopefully it's quite large, that money flows back into these ecosystems, right? Like that's the whole exercise of everything we're trying to do. And so when we look at cutting a check, we are looking to back high growth technology businesses. Like we are aiming for venture returns, which are different than private equity returns, which are different than public market returns, right? Like we are looking
And so
for.
for this group, what would you say, like, if you're putting it in like multiples, is that,
We're looking for like a 10 times on our money,
gotcha.
essentially. It's all case by case, but like that is a good venture benchmark, right? If we have a couple of those every year, like that's unreal, right? So we are looking at high growth technology businesses, but it's only a win for us if the founder walks away with a significant amount of money, right? So if we look at a deal and we underwrite it and we say, okay, if this business is successful, if they sell for $500 million, $1 billion, whatever it is, how much money is the founder going to walk away with? Or how much money is the co-founding team plus their employees? How much money are the actual people within this business that are based, in these two communities going to walk away with? If that isn't significant and meaningful and doesn't put those individuals at a level where they can then give back to their community as angel investors or philanthropists or start a family office, whatever it is, we don't do the deal. And we've walked away from, I think, 3 deals that we got really close on based on dilution concerns, where we were looking at
Is that delusional or delusion?
well, could be both. We've definitely walked away from more deals because of delusional
Yes.
concerns. We've walked away from 3 deals because of dilution concerns. And it's because we were like, look, if this business is as successful as we think it can be, the founder's still just walking away with like $1 million. And like after the tax man comes, unless you dump it all on a death, it's
Yes.
not gonna be great,
Will
right?
not come then.
So that's kind of how we look at our exercise in deploying capital. The actual, like from a strategic level, tactically, we meet a lot of founders. If you guys want to talk to us, we're happy to be helpful in any way we can. We try to be like genuine stewards of the North Carolina entrepreneurial ecosystem, even though we do have a focus on the triangle. So if we can help in any way, shape, or form, let me know. But we will be introduced to a founder either through someone like Jim or even Amy, or the good folks at Hutch have introduced us to plenty of founders, right?
Yeah.
Or you would be surprised at the amount of venture funds that are not based in the state of North Carolina that have invested in a business or are looking at a business here that has no local money in it, and like we're some of the only North Carolina investors they know, and they're like, hey, do you know this company? And then they'll intro us. But we'll meet a founder, we'll get to know them. We kind of go through a lot of our underwriting is focused on the dilution and what we think, terminal value of the business could be. Most of our diligence is focused on the founder as a human being. Like, do we think this is the person to build this business at this time, right? 90% of our process is focused on getting to know the founder. We don't take board seats because we think it's a conflict of interest. We can't say, we are going to be the founder's champion always and forever, and then take a board seat and represent the company, because sometimes those two things are at odds. And at the end of the day, like we are investing, when we invest in North Carolina, we're investing in highly technical sci-fi stuff, right? And I barely made it through accounting at NC State, so like I am woefully underqualified to underwrite the science and technology behind the businesses we're investing in. And so, for that reason, when we interface with our founders after we've made an investment, we're on the cap table, it's a lot of, hey, I'm in the biomanufacturing space. I have been trying to get in front of Fujifilm. I know they have a production facility in Holly Springs or wherever it is. Do you know anyone over there? And like, maybe I know the person, or maybe I know the person who can get us to the person. And so it's kind of special projects based stuff.
Gotcha.
Rather than anything, more tactical and technical.
And do you guys, in terms of leading or following, do you do both?
We do not lead deals.
Okay.
We like to play in the 100 to 300K check range, and so we're following.
And are you following only on equity, or following on sort of whatever the company's raising that interests you?
Yeah, we will do any vehicle. So we've done a couple debt deals, lines of credit, stuff like that. One where the founders were raising money, they were raising equity to bridge them through an acquisition. And we sat down with them to talk about the round, and we were like, it's great that you guys have been able to raise, enough money to kind of get you in a better spot through this potential transaction, but why haven't you raised debt rather than equity? Like, you just need more runway. Your equity is going to be extremely expensive to give up now when you could just pay 6%, 8%, whatever, 10%. And so we ended up doing a debt deal with those guys, because we thought, we did the math and we knew for a fact, and we were right, that it was better for the founders financially. So it's rare that we do something outside of, pre-seed to Series A and follow-on equity, but
Gotcha.
we will pursue a variety of different vehicles.
Okay.
If I can expand on a couple things,
100%.
so I just want to do some like comparing and contrasting. So similarly, Abundance Capital will allow founders who find philanthropists to do debt deals. So if you can find if you need a bridge of
That's
$3 million bucks, and you find a philanthropist, again back to the cancer research
I was
startup.
clocking that.
I'm writing that down.
So, and you need a loan, you can go ask a philanthropist who has $3 million in their DAF or their foundation for $3 million bucks, and that debt deal is no collateral. It's a gentleman's agreement, right? Because again, this is philanthropic capital. So you decide the payback terms and the interest. So between two people, right? I need $3 million bucks to get me from this stage to this stage where I'm going to start selling my cancer research tests and makes tons of money. I can pay you back, and I'll never have to take investment dollars again, because I'm going to be able to be profitable. And so that philanthropist investor can then basically philanthropy wants impact, right? So different from necessarily what X am I going to make on this deal, right? Because they're not going to make any money, again, technically. If they do get returns, it stays in their donor advised fund. So a philanthropist ask is more about impact. With this money, I'm going to be able to grow my company to do this thing, to save these many lives, to help these many people who can't hear now with my revolutionary hearing device. Right, so the ask is different. They don't necessarily care about SOMs and SAMs and TAMs and all of that, right? Because the money's not theirs. They're looking for impact. So that pitch deck you have can be drastically rearranged for a philanthropist who might be investing in your company. They want to know what impact am I going to have in the world if I give you this money? Now, the great PS of your pitch is, when I do this well, you're going to get your money back and then some. And then you can give that money to the American Cancer Society or to another startup. And so that opportunity is not available otherwise. When you're a philanthropist, you're giving your money to nonprofit, you never see that money again. The impact is the good, right, that you do in the nonprofit space. But if you can do good and maybe get your money back and maybe grow that donor advised fund, that is the opportunity that entrepreneurs who are running for-profit social impact companies can offer an investor that traditional nonprofit cannot offer. So debt similar, but returns, it's important, but like that's not, if somebody's like, I want to make money, that's not your person, right? These are people who want to do good, make an impact, and they don't know that they can probably get their money back and then some, and that's the piece that is like the least kind of understood portion of how this all works.
I love knowing who you're pitching to or talking to, and how to tailor, whether it's your pitch deck or even the conversation.
Sure.
Because it's going to be different talking to each of you, and it's going to be different talking to a very large VC fund,
Yeah.
right? In terms of what you're trying to say and how you're trying to position your raise. I think that's a very good tangible point coming out of this that I very usable for folks.
Well, and the same company could get money from both sources.
Right.
Right? So they can fit the profile of the family office and get an investment for profit because they're going to crush it financially and 10x or more their money. And also maybe that company's technology solution is helping something people on the planet, and so then they can go to a philanthropist, flip the pitch a little bit, and pitch the same kind of concept. So the same company can fundraise from both sources if they're positioned similarly, if they fit both kind of profiles.
Let's make this the last question.
That's a lot of pressure.
Make it
That's a
count.
lot of pressure. So I'm going to tie this back to Jim and Wilmington, if I've got one question left. It's going to be, each of you guys come from a little bit different ecosystem than here. So I know, Liam, you're sort of saying, hey, we're North Carolina centric, regionally centric. What advice, if you were giving sort of one bit to these folks in the room about sort of the connection to folks like you, or maybe these alternative sources of capital we're just learning about, what would you say?
Can we go first?
You want me?
Sure.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
if you think your company might qualify as a social impact company, go to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them. Make a really good case for how you align to at least one. The more you align to, the more solid your case will be. And then the second step is then to start to go and talk to people who you think might invest in you with their philanthropic capital. If you need help figuring out how to pitch that or how to talk about it, you can certainly reach out to me and I can give you a couple of sentences. What I'm not allowed to do is help you fundraise. So that's where the IRS says, nope, like I can't help you raise money, but I can, once you find someone who is interested in potentially supporting you this way, I can help them understand how the process works. But I can't make any ask, I can't source, people for you. But I can help you think about who in your community might be interested in this. And it doesn't have to be in Wilmington. Maybe you're from Boston and you know some, wealthy philanthropic families in Boston that care about the type of company you're building. Likely the people you approach will have no freaking clue they can do this. They're going to say this sounds like money laundering. They're going to say this is illegal. They're going to say the IRS will not allow this. That is simply not true. So I'm happy to then get pulled into the conversation, right, and help you explain to them how this works. But again, our focus is keeping Southeast dollars in the Southeast, but obviously this qualifies as that. But you can take investment from anywhere in the country. So we're a pretty open model. Again, you just have to be very solidly aligned with social impact and be able to make a really great case that would stand up to the IRS if they so chose to investigate.
You can just go to abundancecapital.investments and find the 17 areas where they invest. So you don't have to go to the United
SDG.
Nations.
We
right?
we borrowed the content from there, so I actually didn't know it was on there. So thank you for letting me know
Happens to be in
that.
our happens to be in our newsletter, not that any of you read it, but the link to Abundance Capital is the link to the 17 investment areas.
And I have a one-pager that explains all of this. You'll understand it now that you've heard it, but if you just cold call somebody, like you send it to them, they probably won't get it. But anyway, if you wanna connect with me on LinkedIn, Amy Jacobs CLT is my name on there. I'll send you the one-pager, so at least you have something in your hand to kind of put in front of someone if they're like, okay, this isn't true. You can say, this is the model, and then, have a conversation about that. But just put on, if you fundraise as if you were a nonprofit, right? So what does a philanthropist care about? If you can switch that pitch to the impact your company will have on people on the planet, you might be successful in convincing some philanthropists to part with some really big chunks of their philanthropic capital.
Fascinating.
Sounds illegal, doesn't it? But it's not.
If you want to get a hold of me, Jim will put you in touch, or you can email me, or you can reach out on LinkedIn. My email is liam@2ndf.org. We do a lot of connecting throughout the ecosystem outside of RTP. Like I was in San Francisco like a month ago, and I met a guy who is a great investor, and his son is building a furniture robotics business in Hickory, North Carolina, and had just moved from New York City. And he was like, do you want to meet him? And I'm like, if he needs help in North Carolina, I'm happy to meet him. And we put him in touch with a lot of folks. I don't know if you guys leverage the 1NC small business program. I think that's a great program if you're going the SBIR, STTR route. I put him in touch with Chris, who runs that program, and a couple other investors in the kind of deep tech manufacturing tech space here in the region. And like, we probably wouldn't invest in him because he's based in Western North Carolina, not the Triangle. Doesn't mean he's not building a great business. Doesn't mean he's not a great founder. So we want to be helpful to all founders in North Carolina. So any way we can do that, get a hold of us.
Awesome.
All right, we got to call on Adam first.
Yeah, so I think you kind of explained it, but a very interesting model on the venture banking. I don't know any philanthropists offhand, right? When I think of like what philanthropists do I know, and I assume a lot of people are probably like that. I know you say you can't fundraise, but like does Abundance Capital open the DAR or the DAF or whatever it is? Do y'all open the fund for the philanthropists or?
Yeah, so there's two ways. So many philanthropists already have donor advised funds somewhere. So they move their donor advised fund dollars to a donor advised fund at Abundance Capital, which then writes a check to your company.
Gotcha.
Or they can just write a check to Abundance Capital as their initial nonprofit gift, get the tax break there, and then the money moves.
Okay.
So there's a couple of different ways to do it. But you might be surprised. Actually, I was in an exercise last year where somebody said to put philanthropist in ChatGPT, just to see like what does a philanthropist look like, and you'll do that exercise and have a good laugh. But there are a lot of people, especially people in their 40s and 50s, who have begun to accumulate wealth, whatever wealth means, right? Who are starting to park some money there. And so if you might have friends that have $50,000 in a donor advised fund that they don't fit the traditional profile of a philanthropist because their name's not on a building, but they don't, so it's kind of an awkward question, like, hey, do you have a DAF? And most people are like, what is that? But if you have one, right? And so if they're like, no, what is that? Then move on. But if they're like, actually, yeah, or people are inheriting wealth from their parents and grandparents in donor advised funds. So Grandpa John owned some hotel, right? Sold it. His kid has inherited $5 million in philanthropy, right? So it's sitting in a DAF, and they don't know what to do with it, how to spend it. They aren't necessarily wealthy, but they inherited wealth in charitable capital. That could be an opportunity to invest in your company. So it's hard to kind of find out like who's got this money, but if and when you can, then it's on the table for asking for it.
Gotcha, but okay. I'm thinking and laughing at the thought of me like trying to figure out who I know.
I know,
If they happen to be a philanthropist and like, we're looking for a source. But yeah, it's really interesting model. So
Yeah,
thanks
you know,
for-
it's a great place to do it. So if you ever go to like charity galas and there on the back of the brochure is all the people that sponsor the event, all those family names or the names on the hospital or anywhere where like people are bragging about how much money they give away. That's your target list.
Right.
I mean, truly. Yeah, so
Just pick up the phone and
Yeah.
start calling them, right? And I think, yeah, it'd be,
Sure.
Well, not to rain on the parade, but that's my job. Wilmington gives 1/7 of what Asheville gives per capita to nonprofits. And worse, we give $1 out of $12 to what Winston-Salem gives to nonprofits. So I was at the New Hanover Endowment event last night. That was eye-opening. But there needs to be something in this community about more giving, because we do have the Encinos, the Apertures, and the Live Oak Banks, and the Canopy Ventures, and people like Megacorp, and those people are making real generational wealth, and yes, the Live Oak and Encino have been really good at being corporate citizens. Live Oak Pavilion, where we have now live music, and Encino sponsors the food bank. Those are really new to Wilmington, though, so we need to do a better job in this community of nonprofit giving, which is why it's hard to find who these people are. So I would keep an eye on the endowment and who's interacting with the endowment, or the people that go to the garden party. I don't see those people the other 350 days a year. My God, that is a wealthy crowd.
or even other communities, right? So you're a North Carolina-based business, so drive to Raleigh and go to a couple galas up there and look
Yeah.
around in Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte Wealth loves to put their name on buildings. And you might be surprised on LinkedIn that, you're a friend of somebody who married a Belk, or, a friend of a Levine. And so those families have hundreds of millions of dollars in philanthropy, and they just don't know yet that they could invest potentially in your company. It doesn't have to be Wilmington, right? Philanthropy.
And on the other side of this, when our clients sometimes go to sell, in these very large transactions, you'll see founders start to move equity or start to move sort of planning for their side of this, right? Where they're going to have their own DAF, and their DAF's going to own some equity. They're going to cash out that way.
Yeah.
That's an interesting sort of full circle moment.
Another founder in Charlotte just had a liquidity event, opened a donor advised fund, and started investing in their peers from their DAF, simply to fuel the ecosystem. Right? They didn't traditionally have a way to give their money to fellow startups, but now they can.
Is there a dollar limit amount on the DAF?
Nope.
On the opening one?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question for the family office. You said 2 different groups. Did you say applied sciences in the other group? Can you define what applied science is?
Applied sciences is an intentionally broad term
Okay.
that basically means anything that's coming out of research. So that research could be done in a really brilliant engineer's garage, or that research could be done at one of our fine university institutions in the state and being spun out of that university lab. The reason we focus on applied sciences, and our remit is potentially broad term. I'll give you some specific verticals within it, but just about the only research heavy vertical that we don't invest in is therapeutics. Drugs get really expensive really quickly to invest in, and we just cut smaller checks, and so the quicker the numbers get big, the less amount of time we can sustain that business. So we kind of did deals all over the map our first year, and we thought if we are going to be kind of geographically constrained or focused investors, we're going to have this focus on the triangle, we should probably put our money to work where businesses that are being built in the triangle have a unique advantage to win as a function of being built there versus other places in the country or internationally. And when we looked at what the infrastructure supports in a unique manner, we found that that was, science-driven, science-based technology writ large. That could be agricultural technology, aerospace and defense, semiconductors, energy, life science tools, medical devices, diagnostics, advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, what have you. Largely, the grant infrastructure, the programmatic infrastructure lends itself to the applied sciences more so than, let's say,
AI.
B2B software.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And not to say you can't build a good software business in a triangle. GDC was built in the triangle, right? But it's just a little more unique in the applied sciences.
I have a question for both Liam and Amy. Is it okay?
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So I'm carpetbagger from out of town, still in DC, coming down here every week.
That's not too far up.
Well, yeah, only 5.5 hours if you're on cruise control. So my question is more about, if I'm not starting up here, I'm starting up there, is there a directory of family offices or donor advised funds, or is there an association? Do you all get together in groups in your specific industries? That might be okay. Let me go look at this family office, this focuses on software, this family office, this focuses on agriculture. I mean, is there such a thing, like a directory or an association for each of your groups?
We have the same question back here. Yeah.
I don't
Is
know
there a
about you guys.
Is there a platform?
Mine's
But-
easy, no.
Yeah.
Philanthropists don't want to be known as
Yeah.
philanthropists unless their names are on buildings.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unfortunately not.
No. So,
So it's really hard to find us.
but I don't want to just say no. So no, but if you're thinking through tactical sourcing of dollars from a DAF or from a family office, and if I was putting myself in your shoes as a founder, I would get to be really good friends with someone who has a substantial DAF or someone in the family office world. And when you're talking to them, ask them what sorts of events they are going to. And inevitably they will go to like one sort of institutional investor conference a year. So there are a few that we go to. But inevitably you'll be like, where are you going? Or what travel you have coming up? Oh, I'm going to such and such conference. What's that? Oh, it's where a bunch of family offices and endowments and foundations get together and swap notes about macro and a bunch of boring shit. So then, note that, ask them where it is, and then, if it's in Chapel Hill, go hang out in Chapel Hill at, the Carolina Inn, and, you'll inevitably meet a bunch of people in the family office.
Right, because I can't go to the event because I'm not one of those
Right.
unless I'm part of a donor.
You could be a-
advised.
But you can hang out in the lobby.
I would say too, if it's helpful, for folks might be familiar with the resource called PitchBook.
Yeah.
PitchBook, I think, does allow some searching by family offices. So it's basically, it's a resource, like law firms have access to them, investors have access to them, but basically you can go in and say, I'm in this industry looking for an investor in this region that writes checks of this size.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of sort of the reverse engineering that clients can do or companies can do on how to find investors that are writing active checks for your stage
Size,
of development.
Your stage, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Like
there's
ecosystem
a
orgs.
question back here, please.
Ecosystem orgs could know them too, like Jim, right?
What's
Like,
that?
you know about them as well. So-
Right, but NC Idea does have access to PitchBook, I
Yep.
believe, so, and they would give you free access to that. So all you gotta do is call up Tom Rue or Barry Ryan or Amy Bastion or Sarah Mixter at NC Idea, and they would connect you to PitchBook. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks. I'll stand up so I can see Liam a little better. I think you answered the question, Liam, but maybe Amy, is there an exit strategy? I heard you say that you sit on the cap table, but after a couple of years, is there an exit strategy?
It's the same, everything from your perspective as a founder, raising money is the same, regardless of if the money comes from philanthropy or from someone's pocket. So the exit strategy is whatever you have outlined as your plan to exit for all of your investors.
Okay.
So it's not special. The only thing that would be custom is if you do a debt deal. So let's say you're raising equity on one side, right, from traditional investors, and you also need a $2 million loan to get to some milestone that you know will cause, some event where you'll be able to pay your loan back. You could go try to find an actual loan, right, or you can maybe potentially work with the family office and do that, but you could also, it sounds easy, find a philanthropist who could give you a loan for that amount of time, and then you would just pay them back. Those terms would be specific between you and that investor/donor.
But it could work as debt as well?
Yep,
not just-
the beautiful thing about venture philanthropy is because the money is no longer theirs, you can do whatever you want with the terms, and it's just a different way to make an investment.
Mr. White has a question here.
Yeah, you were talking about, sort of along those lines, the exit. So as the money comes back to you, to whoever the DAF was that invested.
Yep.
They don't get to take that money out.
No.
It is just now, it's now part of that bigger pool, the $100 million
You got
DAF
it.
sitting there on the side.
Yep.
And the 60 million that came from, the example that.
Liquidia.
Liquidia that Jim gave. It's just now a bigger way, but now it's, hey, look at what my DAF has done. And
Yep.
yeah.
Exactly. So thinking again about a philanthropist cares about impact. Now they can give away 10 $100,000 grants where before they didn't have that money in that philanthropy account.
And there's no additional tax
No tax,
implication to
no
that
tax,
original
nope.
donor. to be-
Nope. Just that one taxable event when the donor advised fund was funded. Everything that happens afterwards is the IRS can't touch. Unless you are not a social impact company, and then it becomes complicated.
Maybe one more question. I know you can't speak for the market itself, but from your firm's perspective, can you give an idea of how much has been deployed since inception?
About $5 million so far over 3 years. So most of this is early. Sometimes it's a first check. This particular firm, Abundance Capital, it's new, it's boutique, it's a small team, so it's very much one-to-one deals. So about $5 million, I think, ish has been deployed. But the Impact Foundation, a national organization, they've been around for 10 years. They've deployed hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's money moving through the system. It's just lack of awareness is really what the largest piece. And then founders don't really know that they can fundraise this way, and donors don't really know that they can give this way. So if I do my job right over the next few years, right?
That's why we had this
that
event,
will
right?
start to
It's an
shift.
education for
Yeah.
everyone, yeah.
Good question.
And just for everyone's awareness, I just did a quick search on LinkedIn. There's DAP groups on LinkedIn you can check out.
Sweet, do that.
Mr. Paul has a question.
Yeah, Liam, how many deals do you typically do a year? And then I've got a follow-up to that.
We
You
have
gotta pay for the follow-up.
I got a coupon. Typically 4 or 5.
Okay. And what's typically limiting that? Is it the business opportunity, or is it the owner, founder / leadership?
It's the number of deals that we see in a year that we think can hit the metrics that we're looking for.
Any last
Is
questions?
it typically people related, or is it the opportunity or product or idea?
It's all over the place. Like, the people related ones are the toughest to say no to. But like I can think about maybe the most recent deal we passed on is a founder that is like he might be the most thoughtful and intentional person I have ever met in my life. And he's fundamentally a tremendous founder, a world-beating tier 1 founder. It's just a business that we'd never be able to make a dime on.
Oh, and like Coach Burt said, he's in the wrong vehicle, right? Coach Burt made that very clear. All right, can we thank our speakers?
Thank you.